Are you responsible for managing a contact center? Is your contact center running a Mitel My Contact Center business telephone system? Are you wondering how to run reports? Wondering how many callers you had last month? How many callers are hanging up or abandoning before they are answered? How long your average call is lasting? Wondering what time of day your service level is falling? Maybe you're searching for your average speed of answer. If so, you're in the right place. Over the next several minutes, I'll show you the basics that you need for success. But first, before we go any further, there are a few things you need to know. I cover a lot of information and I do it quickly. Please, do not feel overwhelmed. Pause the video, rewind, rewatch it if you need. Set your playback speed slower if you find that helpful. Next, I'll give a few hints and suggestions, but you'll need to know the website address for CCMWeb. You'll need to know your username and password. These will be unique to you and your environment. If you're unsure and are stuck, reach out to your normal IT support group or telephone technician for assistance. Lastly, Mitel has a lot of reports available to help. When I started this video, I began with some questions about the type of reports covered in this specific video. If you want to know how many calls each ACD agent answered last week, if you want to forecast how many agents you'll need to schedule at 10 o'clock a.m. next Monday, if you want to know what percentage of the day your agents are talking on telephones, those questions are not covered in this video. You may want to check other videos. All right. With that out of the way, we're ready to get started. First, let's open your favorite web browser to CCMWeb. If you're unsure, try searching through your desktop icons for one that looks similar to what I'm showing in this video. Next, let's log in. Your environment may be different, but in my environment, I use the same username and password as if I was logging into my computer. When you're successful, you'll see a web page that looks like the one shown. If you see minor variations, that's okay. You may just be on a different version of Mitel My Contact Center business. Across the top of the web page, you should see 4 items: Reports, Report Inbox, My Options, Help. If you're missing Reports and Report Inbox, that means that you have logged in successfully, but you do not have sufficient access rights. For help, reach out to your normal telecom support group. Now, if you're seeing all 4 options, you should be all set. But before going further, let's clarify one thing. Let's suppose that someone called your contact center. They navigated your call menu, they were sent to a path or a queue, and one of your ACD agents answered the call. Let's suppose that the agent had to transfer that caller to one of the other ACD agents on your team. In this example situation, how many calls would you expect to see in your report? Naturally, this question could have different answers. If we look at how much work each agent performed, we will see that 2 different people answered their telephone, 2 ACD phone calls. But in this video, we're not asking about agent performance or agent group performance. We're asking about how many people called our queue. In the example I gave, only 1 call would be shown in the reports. We're asking about the calls in queue, or maybe about a group of queues or queue group. So inside of CCMWeb, we go to Reports. Because we're asking about telephone calls, we go to Voice. And because we're asking about queues or paths, we go to Queue Reports. This concept is important to understand. In many environments, there is a simple call pattern. A call comes in, they're answered, the caller speaks with the ACD agents for a few minutes, the call ends, a new call is taken. In other environments, calls may be conferenced in with interpreters, calls may be transferred to other queues or other agents. And if you try to match one report with another, you'll see variances in how many calls were taken or how long they lasted because you're looking at it from a different perspective. In my simple example, we see that 2 times more calls were answered than the number of calls made. So now that we understand and that we're looking at queue reports, let's dive in. Toward the top left, there's a drop-down showing all the available reports. Now, every environment is different. I do not know your specific setup, so we may have a little guesswork here. Scroll down to the reports that start with the name Q Group. From there, look for Q Group Performance By. You'll notice that there are several time period options like Q Group Performance by Day of Month. All of these reports can be helpful. They're all very similar. But for now, let's select the one that says Q Group Performance by Period. Or you could also call this Q Group Performance by Time of Day. Under that, we'll see a list of Q groups that I have access to choose from. I'm going to choose the Q group that I want to report on. I can select multiple Q groups by holding down Shift or the Control key when I make my selection. If I do, I'll get multiple reports. Now, if you're not seeing the right information, do not fret. Remember how I said there may be some guesswork? If you do not have any options or see the wrong information, go back and change your report type. Instead of Q Group Performance by Period, follow the same process but find Q Performance by Period. For those who have Q groups, you're all set. Q groups are likely just what you need. For those who only have Qs, there's nothing wrong. But if you find that you need to run multiple Q reports and then manually tally the sum of calls across the multiple reports, then have a talk with your telecom support folks. There is some labor involved for configuration, but configuring Q groups might be helpful to make your job easier. Okay, so now we have our reports selected. We have our Q or Q group selected. We will now set a date range. Maybe I set it for just today, maybe last week. In my case, I'm going to look at a whole month of data. In my particular example, this contact center is not open 24/7, so I'll choose the business hours. I can get data by 15-minute intervals, 30-minute or in 1-hour increments. I will keep the default. I'll keep the default language as English, and I'll keep the default as an Excel format. But not only do I want to see this report, but get a copy of the email. So I'll click where it says Distribution. I enter my email address. If I wanted, I could also send the report to a distribution list instead of just my address. Or I could enter multiple email addresses by adding a semicolon between each address. Now that I'm ready, I submit my report. My report request has now been sent to the reporting engine to process. Again, every environment is different, but reports will usually be ready within a couple of minutes and oftentimes within a few seconds. There are two ways that I can get to my report inbox to see the report. You can select either method. If my report appears in amber or orange, it means that it is not yet ready. I'll have to wait a few more seconds. I can place a check in the box, but I usually just press the F5 key or refresh my web page a couple of times and it'll turn green. If you ever see gray, that means that the system has no data available to report on. Once the report is ready, I select View. My web browser will prompt me where to save my file, and I will then open that download. Now, I'm using Google Chrome. If you used a different web browser like Microsoft Edge, the concept will be the same, but you may see small differences in how to open your download. That's okay. The important thing is that you now have your report open in Excel. Toward the top of the report, you can see the report name and parameters. This is a Q Group Performance by Period report. I see that it is for Q Group 925, which is labeled for all Qs. My date range is May 1st to May 31st, and I see the time the report was generated. Looking through the data, I see call metrics by time of day. So as an example, between 7:30 and 7:45 in the morning, I can see that 766 calls were made during this month period. Between 7:45 to 8 o'clock in the morning, 909 calls were made. And the call volume steadily increased. Between 9:15 to 9:30 a.m., there were 1,529 calls. ACD calls offered shows how many people called into one of the queues in this queue group. ACD calls handled shows how many of those calls were answered. An abandoned call means that the caller hung up before it was answered. A short abandon by default is 6 seconds or about 1 ring. The report discloses the number of short abandons, but common practice is not to include short abandons in totals. A long abandon, if the default settings are used, means that the caller, after navigating the call menu and after being transferred into queue, waited in queue at least 6 seconds before abandoning. An interflow means the call was redirected to another destination. Most commonly, this means that the call went to voicemail or maybe a callback request. So as an example, a queue could be configured that if a call is not answered in 20 or 30 seconds to send the call to voicemail. Or maybe a caller is given the option of selecting a callback. This means the caller did not hang up, but the call went or interflowed to the callback routine or to the voicemail system. The total ACD calls handled plus long abandons plus interflows should equal the calls offered. I would suggest that calls requeued and queue unavailable should be 0. Anything else represents a problem. Imagine a caller waiting in queue to be answered. The system detects an idle agent available for the call, so the call is sent to the agent. Their phone starts ringing, but the agent never answers their telephone. In that case, the caller would be sent back into the queue, which is why it's called a requeue. When this happens, the caller maintains their place in line, except of course any other call potentially answered while the requeued caller was waiting for the agent to answer their telephone. The reason why this is a problem is because other reports will show you how much time each agent spent talking, how much time they spent idle, and how much time they were busy. If you have requeues, you can no longer trust those other metrics to be accurate. There can be multiple reasons for a requeue. For example, maybe the agent lost their network connection at an inopportune time and so their phone missed the signal to audibly ring. But in my experience, the most common reason is a training issue. Agents will sneak away from their telephone for a moment. Maybe they need to pull something off the printer. Maybe they work at a front desk and someone approached them to talk. As best practice, agents should be trained to put themselves in a busy status to avoid requeues. Queue unavailable could be caused by a variety of reasons. Maybe the queue was placed into a D&D or Do Not Disturb status as an example. But in my experience, this happens most in the morning when no agents are yet logged into the telephones when calls start coming in, or late in the afternoon when telephone lines are still open, but agents have decided that it's close enough for the weekend to begin a little early. The next 4 columns show which agent group answered the telephone call. In simple configurations, all calls will be answered by Group 1, and you will see Groups 2, 3, and 4 0. If that is what you see on your report, you can likely ignore these columns. In the example shown, calls will come in and be assigned to an agent group. When all ACD agents are busy and after a configured period of time, maybe 20 seconds as an example, the call will overflow to a second agent group. The system will then look to both agent groups to find an agent available to answer the call. After another configured period of time, maybe 10 more seconds as an example, the call will overflow again. The system will then look to all 3 agent groups to find an agent that can answer the call. There can be up to 4 agent groups configured for each queue. The next series of columns shows times. The times are in the format of hours, minutes, seconds. So between 7:45 to 8 o'clock a.m., the average speed of answer, or ASA, was 3 minutes, 45 seconds. That is, a caller went through the call menu, they were transferred into the queue, and for 3 minutes and 45 seconds they listened to music on hold or whatever call treatment was configured while they were waiting. The average caller, after waiting for 3 minutes and 45 seconds, was answered. The average time to abandon was 2 minutes, 17 seconds. This does not tally the short abandons, only the long abandons. In my examples, there were no interflows, so that column is showing 0. When voicemail is configured to be the interflow point, I would expect to see interflows at between 20 and 30 seconds, and that number would be consistent across all time periods. When callbacks interflow, the interflow times will be more variable. The ACD handling time and average ACD handling time go together. Between 7:45 and 8 o'clock a.m., there were 86 hours, 14 minutes, 18 seconds of handling time, which includes talk time and hold time. If you divide the 86 hours, 14 minutes by the 779 calls handled, it would mean each call lasted 6 minutes, 39 seconds on average. This also works in reverse. At 7:45 a.m., the average call duration was 6 minutes, 39 seconds. Multiplied by the 779 calls handled equals 86 hours, 14 minutes of ACD time. Finally, we see the percentage of calls abandoned, the service level, and the percentage of calls answered. The percent answered plus percent abandoned should total 100%. Service level is configurable. By default, I believe it is about 2 minutes. The report is showing the percentage of calls answered within that period. Mitel has a lot of data available through reports, but I would suggest that the service level is a key indicator. If you're constantly at 100%, you may need to be more assertive on your timers, and likewise, if you consistently have a low percentage, it indicates a problem or that the timers are too aggressive. Ideally, whatever you configure the service level to be, you want to strive to consistently answer 80% of your calls within that period. In this example, we have the service level set at 30 seconds. That is, service level percent is showing the percentage of calls answered within 30 seconds. We see the service level improves throughout the morning. So to correct this, you as a manager of a contact center might look at whether you could give a few additional agents earlier shifts without impacting your late afternoon numbers. If this was in the afternoon, maybe you would look at staggering lunch breaks. If you've found this information helpful, please give me a like or consider subscribing. If you have your own tip or hint, please leave a comment to share for others. This really does help the algorithm know so the content is shared with others like you.